The campfire snapped, spitting embers into the star-dusted sky, and I felt the weight of his gaze before I saw it. Javier's eyes, dark and unreadable, locked onto mine across the flickering flames. And for a moment, the world shrank to just us. My heart stumbled, caught off guard, as if it knew something my mind hadn't yet dared to name. We were 4 days into a week-long escape to a cabin in the Adirondacks, a getaway planned on a whim by Maya, who swore we all needed to unplug and live a little. She wasn't wrong. Life in Brooklyn had been a grind. Elliot juggling freelance coding gigs, Maya chasing art commissions, Lila buried in her novel revisions. And Javier, well, Javier was always harder to pin down. A bartender with a poet's soul, he'd drift between charm and mystery, leaving you wondering what lay beneath his easy grin. We'd been friends since college, a tight-knit crew bound by late-night talks and shared dreams. But this trip felt different. The air was heavier, laced with something unspoken. I'm Elliot, by the way, 25, perpetually overthinking, and more comfortable debugging code than decoding my own feelings. I'd always been the quiet one, content to listen while Maya spun wild stories or Lila dissected life's big questions. Javier, Thuff, had this way of pulling me out of my shell, like he could see parts of me I hadn't figured out myself. That night by the fire, his look wasn't just friendly. It was searching, almost pleading, and it sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the crisp mountain air. The day had been perfect, the kind you'd see in a travel vlog. We'd hiked to a waterfall, Maya snapping photos of every leaf like it was a masterpiece, Lila scribbling in her notebook, and Javier leading the way with that effortless confidence of his. He'd teased me about my clunky hiking boots, saying they screamed city boy, but his hand lingered on my shoulder a beat too long when he helped me over a rock. I'd brushed it off, like I always did. Javier was just like that, tactile, warm, larger than life. But now, under the weight of his stare, those moments felt like breadcrumbs leading somewhere I wasn't ready to go. Elliot, you good? Maya's voice cut through the haze, her brow raised as she tossed another stick into the fire. She was sprawled on a blanket, her tattoos catching the light, a bottle of cider in her hand. Yeah, just zoning out, I mumbled, forcing a smile. Javier's gaze flicked away, but not before I caught the faintest curve of his lips, like he knew something I didn't. Lila, ever the observer, adjusted her glasses and tilted her head. You two are weird tonight, she said, her tone teasing but sharp. What's the vibe? Nothing's the vibe, Javier said quickly, leaning back with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. He pulled his leather jacket tighter, the firelight dancing across his features. Just enjoying the view. My cheeks burned, and I busied myself with my marshmallow stick, pretending the heat came from the fire. But Lila's words stuck. Was there a vibe? I'd spent years convincing myself my feelings for Javier were just friendship safe, platonic, uncomplicated. He was the guy who'd crash on my couch after a late shift, who'd text me random song lyrics at 2 a.m., who'd once spent an hour teaching me how to salsa in my tiny apartment. He was my best friend. Anything more was a risk I couldn't afford. The night deepened, and we swapped stories, the kind that only come out when the world feels far away. Maya told us about her latest mural, a tribute to her Puerto Rican roots, and Lila read a passage from her novel, her voice trembling with emotion. Javier was quieter than usual, his usual banter replaced by long silences. When it was his turn, he stared into the fire, his voice low. I used to come to places like this with my brother, he said, almost to himself. Before he left, we'd camp, fish, talk about nothing. He was the only one who ever got me. The group fell silent. Javier rarely talked about his brother, who'd cut ties with their family years ago. I wanted to reach out, to say something, but my tongue felt heavy. Instead, I watched him, the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers traced patterns in the dirt. There was a rawness to him I hadn't seen before, and it pulled at something deep inside me. Anyway, Javier said, shaking his head as if to clear it, "This is better. You guys are my family now." Maya slung an arm around him, and Lila raised her cider in a toast. "To chosen family," she said, and we all echoed her, our voices mingling with the crackle of the fire. But as I clinked my bottle against Javier's, his fingers brushed mine, deliberate and slow, and my breath caught. The night wound down, and we retreated to the cabin, a cozy wooden haven with creaky floors and mismatched furniture. Maya and Lila claimed the loft, giggling as they dragged their sleeping bags upstairs. Javier and I took the 2 small bedrooms on the main floor, across the hall from each other. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying that look by the fire. It was just a look, I told myself. Just a moment. But my heart wouldn't settle, and when I heard the soft creak of his door opening, I froze. "Elliot." His voice was a whisper, barely audible through the wall. I didn't answer, too afraid of what might come next. But as I lay there, the darkness pressing in, I knew something had shifted. This trip wasn't just a getaway anymore. It was the start of something bigger, something that could break us or bind us forever. The next morning, the cabin smelled of coffee and bacon, Maya's attempt at a rustic breakfast filling the air with warmth. Sunlight streamed through the windows, painting the wooden walls gold, but I couldn't shake the weight of last night. Javier's glance by the fire lingered in my mind like a song stuck on repeat, and every time I caught his eye over breakfast, my stomach twisted. "Elliot, you gonna eat or just stare at your eggs?" Maya teased, flipping a pancake with a flourish. She'd tied her hair back with a bandana, her energy as bright as the morning. "Just thinking," I said, poking at my plate. Javier was across the table, sipping coffee, his dark eyes fixed on the mug like it held the secrets of the universe. He hadn't said much since we'd gathered, and I wondered if he felt it too, the shift, the unspoken question hanging between us. Lila, scribbling in her notebook, looked up. "You're both acting like you saw a ghost last night." "Spill." Javier's laugh was quick, a little too loud. "No ghosts, Lila. Just tired. Late night. You know." But I knew better. His voice had that edge, the one he used when he was dodging something. I wanted to call him out, to ask what that look meant, but the words stayed lodged in my throat. Instead, I pushed my chair back and mumbled something about needing air. Outside, the lake glittered under the morning sun, and I wandered to the dock, my sneakers thudding against the weathered wood. The Adirondacks were breathtaking, pine trees stretching toward the sky, mountains looming in the distance, but all I could think about was Javier. Was I reading too much into it? Or was he trying to tell me something? Footsteps crunched behind me, and I turned to see Javier, hands in his pockets, his leather jacket swapped for a faded hoodie. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. I nodded, my pulse quickening. We sat on the edge of the dock, our legs dangling over the water, the silence between us heavy but not uncomfortable. For a moment, it was just us and the lake, the world holding its breath. "You were quiet last night," I said finally, staring at the ripples below. "After the fire. Everything okay?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up a pebble and tossed it into the water, watching it sink. "Just thinking about stuff. My brother. Mostly. This place reminds me of him." I nodded, unsure what to say. Javier's brother, Mateo, was a sore spot. He'd left home at 18, after a fight with their parents over his sexuality. Javier never talked about it directly, but I'd pieced together enough to know it had left scars. "You miss him?" I said quietly. "Yeah." His voice was barely above a whisper. "But it's more than that. Being here, with you guys, it makes me realize how much I've been holding back." My heart stuttered. Holding back what? He turned to me then, his eyes searching mine, and there it was again, that look from last night, raw and unguarded. "Everything, Elliot. Who I am. What I want." I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. "And what do you want?" For a moment, I thought he'd say it. I thought he'd bridge the gap between us with words we couldn't take back. But instead, he smiled, a small, sad thing, and stood up. "Let's head back. Maya's probably burning the cabin down by now." Disappointment curled in my chest, but I followed him, the moment slipping away like the pebble in the lake. The rest of the day passed in a blur, kayaking, laughing, Maya's endless playlists blaring from a portable speaker. But every time Javier brushed past me or laughed a little too long at my jokes, I felt it, the pull, the question, the fear of what answering it might mean. That night, we played cards in the cabin, the table cluttered with empty cider bottles and half-eaten snacks. Lila was ruthless, winning every round, while Maya accused her of cheating. Javier and I were on the same team, and every time our hands brushed reaching for a card, I felt a spark. I caught him watching me again, his expression unreadable, and I wondered how much longer we could dance around this. "Elliot, your turn," Lila said, snapping me out of it. I fumbled my cards, and Javier's hand shot out to steady mine, his touch lingering. Maya raised an eyebrow but said nothing, and I felt like the whole room could hear my heartbeat. Later, as we cleaned up, Javier volunteered to wash dishes, and I offered to dry, needing something to do with my hands. The kitchen was small, the sink barely big enough for both of us, and our elbows kept brushing. Each touch felt like a question, and I didn't know how to answer. "You're quiet tonight," he said, handing me a wet plate. His voice was casual, but his eyes weren't. "Just a lot on my mind," I said, focusing on the dish towel. "Like what?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. How could I say it? That I was terrified of ruining what we had. That every time he looked at me, I felt like I was falling. Instead, I shook my head. "Just work stuff. You know me." He didn't buy it. I could tell by the way he paused, his hands still in the soapy water. "Elliot," he said softly, "you don't have to hide from me." My breath hitched. Before I could respond, Maya burst in, demanding we join her for a midnight swim. The moment broke, and we followed her outside, the tension trailing us like a shadow. As we stood by the lake, the water black under the moon, I stole a glance at Javier. He was watching me again, and this time, I didn't look away. The lake was freezing, the kind of cold that seizes your bones and makes you gasp. Maya, fearless as always, dove in first, her laughter echoing across the water. Lila waded in cautiously, muttering about hypothermia, while Javier and I lingered on the shore, the moonlight casting long shadows around us. I was hyper-aware of him standing next to me, his silhouette sharp against the silver glow, and my heart pounded with a mix of dread and longing. "You going in?" he asked, his voice low, almost lost in the sound of the waves lapping the shore. I shivered, not just from the cold. "Maybe." "You." He grinned, that familiar spark in his eyes, but there was something else too, something vulnerable. "Only if you do." Before I could overthink it, he grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the water. His grip was warm, steady, and I let him lead me, my pulse racing as we splashed into the shallows. The cold hit like a shockwave, but his hand in mine kept me grounded. Maya hooped from deeper in the lake, and Lila splashed her, their laughter pulling us into the moment. For a while, we were just friends again, messing around, carefree. But when Javier let go of my hand to dunk Maya, I felt the absence like a physical ache. We swam until our teeth chattered, then scrambled back to the shore, dripping and laughing. Maya wrapped herself in a towel, declaring she was done with nature, while Lila started a debate about the best way to warm up. Javier and I ended up by the fire pit again, sharing a blanket as we dried off. The others went inside to change, leaving us alone, the crackling flames our only company. "You're shivering," Javier said, scooting closer. He draped the blanket tighter around me, his arm brushing mine, and I couldn't tell if the warmth came from the fire or him. "I'm fine," I lied, my voice barely steady. His closeness was dizzying, and I fought the urge to lean into him. He didn't say anything for a moment, just stared into the fire, his jaw tight. Then, quietly, "Elliot, can I ask you something?" My stomach dropped. "Sure." He hesitated, like he was choosing his words carefully. "Do you ever feel like you're hiding who you are? Not from the world, but from yourself?" The question hit like a punch. I thought about the years I'd spent dodging my feelings, telling myself they were just a phase, a fluke. I thought about the nights I'd lain awake, wondering what it would be like to be honest with him, with myself. "Yeah," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "All the time." He turned to me, his eyes searching mine, and I saw something break open in him. "I've been hiding too," he said, "for a long time. But being here, with you, it's making it harder to keep it in." My heart was a drumbeat in my chest. "What are you saying?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, shaking his head. "I don't know how to say it, Elliot. Not yet. But I want to." Before I could respond, Maya's voice rang out from the cabin, calling us inside for hot chocolate. Javier stood, offering me a hand, and I took it, my fingers trembling. The moment passed, but it left a crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. The next day was a blur of activity: hiking, cooking, Maya's endless photo ops, but the tension between Javier and me grew thicker. Every glance, every accidental touch, felt like a spark waiting to ignite. I caught Lila watching us, her writer's mind clearly piecing things together. But she didn't push. Maya, oblivious, kept the group moving, her energy a welcome distraction. That evening, we decided to stargaze, spreading blankets on a hill overlooking the lake. The sky was a canvas of stars, brighter than I'd ever seen in Brooklyn. We lay side by side, our shoulders brushing, and Javier pointed out constellations, his voice soft and steady. He knew them all: Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper, like he'd spent his life studying the sky. I wondered how many other things about him I didn't know. "Elliot," he said after a while, his voice barely audible, "you ever think about what you'd do if you weren't afraid?" I turned my head, meeting his gaze. The stars reflected in his eyes, and I felt like I was falling into them. "Every day," I said, "but fear's a hard thing to shake." He nodded, like he understood, and reached for my hand under the blanket. His fingers laced through mine, warm and sure, and I didn't pull away. We lay there, silent, holding hands under the stars, and for the first time, I let myself imagine what it would be like to stop hiding. But the moment couldn't last. Lila sat up, pointing out a shooting star, and the group erupted in excited chatter. Javier's hand slipped from mine, and I felt the loss like a physical blow. As we packed up and headed back to the cabin, I knew we were running out of time. This trip would end, and with it, the fragile space where we could be honest. I didn't know if I was ready to face what came next, but I knew I couldn't keep running from it. The cabin felt smaller the next day, as if the walls were closing in on the secrets we carried. Breakfast was quieter, the group nursing hangovers from too much cider and late-night talks. I caught Javier stealing glances at me, but every time I tried to meet his eyes, he'd look away, like he was wrestling with something too big to name. My own thoughts were a tangled hope, fear, and a desperate need to know what he'd meant by hiding. Maya, oblivious to the undercurrent, suggested a canoe trip down the lake. "We need adventure," she declared, tossing paddles into the canoes like a general rallying her troops. Lila groaned but complied, and soon we were gliding across the water, the mountains framing the horizon. Javier and I ended up in the same canoe, him steering in the back while I paddled in front. His presence behind me was a constant pull, like gravity. "You're terrible at this," he teased, his voice lighter than it had been all morning. "We're gonna crash into Maya if you don't straighten out." "Shut up," I shot back, laughing despite myself. "You're the one steering." He chuckled, and for a moment, it was just us again, the way it used to be, easy, familiar. But then his hand brushed mine as he adjusted the paddle, and the air shifted. I glanced back, and his expression was serious, almost pained. "Elliot," he said, so quietly I barely heard him over the water. "I meant what I said last night. About hiding." I froze, my paddle still in the water. "Yeah." He nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I've been scared to admit who I am. Not just to you, but to myself. But I'm tired of it. I want to be real." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. "Real about what?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he dipped his paddle into the water, guiding us toward a quiet cove where the others couldn't hear. The canoe rocked gently as we stopped, the world narrowing to just us. "I've liked you for a long time, Elliot," he said finally, his voice raw. "More than a friend. And I think you feel it too." The words hit me like a wave, washing away every defense I'd built. I wanted to say yes, to tell him I'd felt it for years, but fear clamped down on my tongue. What if this changed everything? What if we lost what we had? "Javier," I started, but my voice cracked. He leaned forward, his hand finding mine, and the warmth of his touch steadied me. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "I just needed you to know." Before I could respond, Maya's voice echoed across the water, calling us back. The moment shattered, and we paddled back in silence, my mind racing. He'd said it. He'd laid it bare. And now I had to decide what to do with it. That night, we cooked dinner together, the cabin filled with the smell of garlic and herbs. Maya and Lila took over the kitchen, bickering over spices, while Javier and I set the table. Every move felt charged, like we were dancing around landmines. When our hands brushed passing a plate, I felt it in my bones. After dinner, we played music, Maya strumming her guitar while Lila sang off-key. Javier sat next to me on the couch, closer than necessary, his knee brushing mine. I wanted to lean into him, to let go of the fear, but doubt kept me anchored. What if this was a mistake? What if I wasn't ready? As the night wound down, Javier offered to clean up, and I followed him into the kitchen, needing to say something. Anything. The others were outside, stargazing again, leaving us alone. I stood by the sink, watching him scrub a pan, his movements deliberate. "Javier," I said, my voice barely steady. What you said earlier. I feel it too. I have for a long time. He froze, the sponge still in his hand, and turned to face me. His eyes were wide, vulnerable, like he hadn't expected me to say it. You do. I nodded, my throat tight. But I'm scared. I don't want to mess this up. You're my best friend. He set the pan down and stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him. I'm scared too, he said. But I'd rather be scared with you than keep pretending. My breath caught, and for a moment, we just stood there, the space between us electric. Then he reached out, his hand cupping my cheek, and I leaned into it, my heart racing. It was the closest we'd ever been to crossing the line, and I wanted it so badly it hurt. But before anything could happen, the door swung open, and Maya burst in, oblivious. You guys done yet? We're starting a bonfire, she called, dragging us outside. The moment was gone, but its weight lingered. As we sat by the fire, Javier's hand found mine under the blanket again, and this time, I squeezed back. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I couldn't go back to pretending. Not anymore. The fire crackled, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill in my bones. Javier's hand in mine felt like an anchor, but also a question one I wasn't sure I could answer yet. The others were oblivious, Maya telling ghost stories with dramatic flair while Lila rolled her eyes. But I could barely focus. All I could feel was Javier's thumb brushing against my knuckles, each touch a quiet promise. When the fire died down, we headed inside, the group's laughter fading into yawns. Maya and Lila claimed the loft again, leaving Javier and me to our rooms. But as I stood in the hallway, my door half open, Javier lingered, his eyes searching mine. Night, Elliot, he said, his voice soft but heavy with meaning. Night, I managed, my heart pounding as I closed my door. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment: the canoe, the kitchen, the fire. He'd said he liked me. I'd said it back. So why was I still so afraid? The next morning, the group decided to hike to a nearby peak, a grueling trail Maya swore would change our lives. The climb was steep, the air thin, and I lagged behind, my thoughts heavier than my backpack. Javier stayed close, offering me water or a hand over rocky patches, his touches gentle but deliberate. Each one chipped away at my defenses, and I wondered how long I could keep holding back. At the summit, the view was breathtaking, mountains rolling out in every direction, the lake a shimmering jewel below. Maya snapped photos, Lila sketched in her notebook, and Javier and I sat on a boulder, catching our breath. The others wandered off to explore, leaving us alone, the wind carrying their voices away. You've been quiet today, Javier said, his shoulder brushing mine. You okay? I nodded, but it was a lie. I was a mess of want and fear, and his closeness wasn't helping. Just processing, I said. What you said yesterday. What I said. He turned to me, his expression serious. Do you regret it? No, I said quickly, surprising myself. I meant it. I don't know how to do this. I've never. Me neither. He cut in, his voice soft. Not like this. Not with someone who matters this much. My chest tightened. What if we screw it up? What if it changes everything? He reached for my hand, his fingers warm against mine. It already has, Elliot. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the boy I'd known for years, the one who'd danced with me in my apartment, who'd stayed up late talking about dreams and fears. But I also saw someone new, someone who was risking everything to be honest with me. and I wanted to be that brave too. Before I could second-guess myself, I leaned in and kissed him. It was quick, tentative, but it set my nerves on fire. He froze for a split second, then kissed me back, his hand cupping the back of my neck, pulling me closer. The world fell away the mountains. The wind, the fear. It was just us, and it felt right. When we pulled apart, his eyes were bright, a smile tugging at his lips. "Took you long enough," he teased, but his voice was shaky. I laughed, the sound breaking the tension. "Shut up." We sat there, hands still tangled, until Maya's voice called us back. The hike down was easier, my steps lighter, but the weight of what we'd done lingered. We'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. That night, we cooked a feast, the cabin filled with laughter and music. Javier and I kept stealing glances, our secret humming between us. Lila noticed, her eyes narrowing, but she didn't say anything. Maya, as usual, was too caught up in her own world to see it. After dinner, we played charades, and Javier and I were hopeless, laughing too hard to guess each other's clues. When his hand brushed mine, it felt different now, charged, intentional. I wondered if the others could sense it, the shift in the air. Later, as we cleaned up, Javier pulled me aside, his voice low. "Can we talk?" "Outside." My heart skipped, but I nodded. We slipped out to the porch, the night cool and quiet. He leaned against the railing, his hands in his pockets, and I could see the nerves in his eyes. "I don't want to push you," he said, "but I need to know where you're at. Because it's real for me." "It's real for me too," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I'm still figuring it out. I've never been with a guy. I've never let myself think about it." He nodded, like he'd expected that. "I get it. I've been there. But I'm done hiding. Elliot. I want this. I want us." The words hit me hard, and I stepped closer, closing the gap between us. "I want it too," I said. "I'm just scared." He reached for me, his hand on my cheek, and this time, when he kissed me, it wasn't tentative. It was sure, deep, and it felt like coming home. When we pulled back, I was breathless, but I was smiling. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Together." The next day felt like a dream, every moment tinged with the weight of what Javier and I had admitted. We were careful around the others, keeping our touches subtle, but the air between us crackled. Maya and Lila seemed oblivious, caught up in their own worlds, but I caught Lila's knowing glance once or twice, like she was piecing together a puzzle. We spent the morning fishing, or trying to. Maya's impatience scared off every fish within a mile, and Lila was more interested in reading by the lake. Javier and I sat on the dock, our lines bobbing in the water, stealing moments to talk when the others were distracted. "How long have you known?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "About you." He leaned back, the sun catching the edges of his hair. "Since high school, I think." But I didn't want to face it. My family, they're old school. My brother coming out didn't help. It's why he left. I nodded, the pieces of his story clicking into place. "And now?" "Now." He looked at me, his eyes soft. "Now I'm done running. Especially after this trip. After you." My chest tightened, and I wanted to say something, but Maya's shout about a tangled fishing line broke the moment. We laughed it off, but his words stayed with me, heavy and warm. That afternoon, we explored a nearby town, wandering through shops filled with local crafts and overpriced coffee. Javier and I lagged behind, our hands brushing as we walked. At one point, He slipped his arm around my waist, quick and casual, and I froze, glancing around to see if anyone noticed. No one did, but the thrill of it lingered. Back at the cabin, we planned a final big dinner our last night before heading back to Brooklyn. The kitchen was chaos, everyone pitching in, and Javier and I kept finding excuses to be close. When I passed him a knife, our fingers lingered, and when he handed me a bowl, his smile was just for me. It was reckless, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. After dinner, we built another fire, the group settling into the rhythm of our last night. Maya strummed her guitar, and Lila read a new chapter from her novel, her voice steady and sure. Javier and I sat close, our knees touching, and I felt like I was living two lives, one with my friends, one with him. As the fire burned low, Maya suggested a game of truth or dare, her eyes gleaming with mischief. Lila groaned, but we humored her. The dare starting silly. Lila had to sing a pop song. I had to do a terrible dance. But when it was Javier's turn, Maya's grin turned wicked. Truth, Javier said, leaning back with a smirk. Maya didn't hesitate. What's going on with you and Elliot? The air went still. Lila's eyes widened, and I felt my face burn. Javier's smirk faded, and he looked at me, his expression unreadable. Nothing's going on, he said, but his voice was too careful, and I saw Lila's brow raise. Bullshit, Maya said, laughing. You two have been weird all week. Spill. I wanted to sink into the ground, but Javier's hand found mine under the blanket, squeezing gently. Okay, he said, his voice steady now. Truth. I like him. A lot. And I think he likes me too. My heart stopped. Lila's mouth fell open, and Maya let out a triumphant whoop. I knew it. She crowed, pointing at us. You owe me $20, Lila. You're betting on us. I managed, my voice shaky but laughing. Obviously, Maya said, grinning. You're not subtle. Lila recovered, her smile soft. I'm happy for you guys, she said. Really? The moment should have been awkward, but it wasn't. It was warm, like the fire, like Javier's hand in mine. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe, like I didn't have to hide. Later, as we cleaned up, Javier pulled me aside again, his eyes serious. You okay with that? Me saying it out loud. I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah. It felt good. He smiled, that real, unguarded smile I loved. Good. Because I'm not done saying it. We went to bed that night, our doors across the hall, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about his words, his touch, the way our friends had embraced us. It was more than I'd dared to hope for, but it also made the future real. Brooklyn was waiting, with its noise and chaos and the weight of real life. Could we carry this with us? I heard his door creak open, then a soft knock on mine. Elliot. He whispered. I opened the door, and there he was, his hair mussed, his eyes bright in the moonlight. Can't sleep, he said, stepping inside. Can I stay? I nodded, and we sat on my bed, talking in whispers about everything, our fears, our dreams, the years we'd spent circling each other. When he kissed me, it was slow, deliberate, and it felt like a promise. We fell asleep tangled together, the world outside fading away. Morning came too soon, the sun creeping through the cabin windows, signaling the end of our escape. I woke with Javier's arm around me, his breath warm against my neck. And for a moment, I didn't move, wanting to hold onto the feeling. But the real world was calling, and we had to pack up, leave the lake, and face whatever came next. Over breakfast, Maya and Lila were relentless, teasing us about our secret romance. Javier took it in stride, his arms slung around my shoulders, while I blushed and stammered. It was new, this openness, but it felt right, like a weight had lifted. As we loaded the car, Javier pulled me aside, his expression serious. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Us. I mean, back in Brooklyn." I thought about the life waiting for us, the grind of work, the noise of the city, the questions from friends and family. I thought about my own fears, the years I'd spent denying who I was. But looking at him, his eyes steady and warm, I knew the answer. "I'm sure," I said, and I meant it. The drive back was quiet, each of us lost in our thoughts. Maya blasted her playlist, and Lila scribbled in her notebook. But Javier and I sat in the back, our hands tangled together. Every mile brought us closer to reality, but it also felt like a new beginning. Back in Brooklyn, life resumed its relentless pace. I went back to coding, Javier to bartending, but we made time for each other: coffee dates, late-night walks, quiet moments in my apartment. It wasn't perfect. There were fights, doubts, moments when I wondered if we'd moved too fast. My family didn't understand, and I knew Javier's wouldn't either. But we faced it together, leaning on each other, on Maya and Lila, who became our biggest cheerleaders. One night, a month later, we sat on my fire escape, the city sprawling below us. Javier was quiet, his fingers tracing patterns on my hand. "You know," he said, "that night by the fire, when I looked at you, I knew I couldn't keep pretending. You changed everything." I leaned my head against his shoulder, the city lights blurring. "You changed me too," I said. I was so scared to be honest. "But you made it feel possible." He kissed me, soft and sure, and I thought about the lake, the stars, the moment we'd stopped hiding. It wasn't just a vacation, it was the start of us. And as we sat there, the world noisy and alive around us, I knew we'd be okay. We'd chosen each other, and that was enough. The journey hadn't been easy. Coming out to myself, to my friends, to the world, it was a battle I hadn't expected to fight. But it was worth it. Javier's hand in mine, his laugh, his quiet strength, they were worth it. We weren't perfect, but we were real, and that was more than I'd ever dreamed of. As the city hummed below, I thought about the value of being seen, truly seen, by someone who loved you for who you were. Javier had given me that, and I'd given it to him. Our story wasn't just about romance, it was about courage, about choosing truth over fear, about building a life together despite the odds. And in that moment, with his warmth beside me, I knew we'd keep choosing it, every single day.